Okay, so as you probably know by this time, if you've already had students been here for at least one semester, capstones are how we put together what we learned. We take what we learn and we pull it together in a project. One of the courses I teach is called Kingdom Citizenship. It's a course on discipleship, and it is about how does someone speak into someone else's life and how can someone speak into your life. The capstone for this was that they had to find a mentor and have at least five meetings with that mentor to address their spiritual growth and spiritual questions and whatever else may be going on in their life. So, what we're going to do is I'm going to grab your papers real quick, but I need Alea and Carson and Emmy and Andy come on up, and I'm going to interview you guys. So, to get prepared for this capstone, they had to write a paper about it. And that way, anything they said, I now have documented. I can use against them as I see fit. All right. So tell me about, and whoever wants to answer this question can, tell me about the process of finding someone and how did that go for you?
So I had a rather unique process of finding my mentor this past semester. After we were first informed by Tom that this was going to be an assignment of ours, started asking God for one in prayer. I had many mature people in my life where I'm like, yeah, sure, you'd work, but none of them that I really felt prompted by God that they were the right fit. So it was about 2 weeks spent in prayer, searching for one. And I'd been invited to a prayer night at a local church from a few classmates of mine. Showed up that night, a great night of worship. And then the next few days while I was in prayer, there was this one man there who I would later find out was an elder and pastor at that church. And his face kept coming to mind in prayer, like consistently in a way. It's like, okay, God is nudging me in this. So I stalked this man online, found his email, sent him an email, and was like, hey, kind of met you last week. You're kind of a complete stranger. You don't know me at all, but do you want to mentor me? And by the grace of God, because of course I should just have faith that God's calling me to it, it'll work out. Well, sure enough, responded to that email, and then we've met like 8 times so far. So yeah, that's that.
When Tom announced this capstone to us, there was one name that came to my mind, and it was my children's pastor at an old church of mine. And I knew that just then that God wanted us to reconnect and that we had a close relationship just because he was my children's pastor and he made such an impact in my life that I knew that he was the one that I wanted to mentor me and to grow in my spiritual walk.
Yep.
So my process looked a lot different from everybody else's because my process didn't actually end up with me getting a mentor. I juggled a bunch of different things over the semester and ended up dropping this assignment overall, but I tried to make sure that I was still being poured into spiritually. And so that led me to looking deeper into all of the interactions I had with people, whether it be my facilitators or my parents or my friends. Um, just making sure that even if I couldn't find a mentor by the end of the semester, I could still absorb what God needed me to.
What do you think might have been the difference if you had one person versus the, I don't know, four or five people that were speaking into you?
I think something I was missing was kind of that targeted, focused growth. Um, it was a time of a lot of very general growth. I had a lot of different things happening all across the board. But because I didn't have one person I was working with, I didn't have somebody that I could kind of build up a relationship with specifically as a mentor.
So, Aaliyah, you knew the person you were going to ask, and Carson, you didn't know the person 2 days before, right? Tell me about then the first meetings that you have. How did that go? Was there an awkwardness? How do you get into conversations that are beneficial?
So for our first few meetings, we kind of got into we were just starting a book. We were very intentional about it, and we for the first two meetings we didn't have the book because it was still coming in. So we kind of talked a little bit about what I wanted to get out of this and where my spiritual walk is. And at the time, I felt with everything moving here, starting fresh start, and adulthood was really hard spiritually for me, finding my own faith. But he kind of really brought me back to that first few weeks, and then we started getting into the book and learning how to be disciples to others, and that was something that we really talked a lot about.
It was, of course, helpful having common ground, both Christians, and I knew that much going into it. It was really interesting tiptoeing around doctrine the first two meetings, um, because of course you have your like salvational issues, and then there's the whole other suite of Christian ideology that oftentimes across the spectrum we disagree on. And so it was neat because by the end of those first two meetings, we ended up agreeing on everything, which was great, and of course by design. But really, at the beginning, it just looked like sharing each other's testimonies, and he had a really neat testimony, and I guess I consider myself to have a pretty neat testimony as well. That helped us bond a lot.
Emmy, I know you went to your worship pastor, and by coincidence, that's what you want to go into, right? And so did that have a big influence on who you chose, or was it just because of the relationship that you chose this person?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say I spent a lot of time like praying about who I should go to, and I had a couple different options, but it really wasn't until I figured out what I wanted to get out of the mentorship that I decided who I should pick, and I did end up picking my worship leader. And that didn't really have a big impact on why I chose it, but I realized after I chose it that that was really, really helpful for me to get some really good insight into worship ministry, along with just my own personal growth set aside from worship ministry, but just to see how she carried herself and how she answered her questions. And it was really good for me to see that, and it shows me who I aspire to be like.
And I think if I remember your paper correctly, you there was some discussion about the profession of worship ministry, but if I remember correctly, it was more about your spiritual growth and who you are when you lead worship. Am I correct about that? Was this a surprise for you? Did you expect to be going this direction in these meetings?
I would say I was mostly thinking that it would be very much worship focused and not necessarily spiritual growth. However, I'm very glad it wasn't because I think my spiritual growth is really important to be able to lead worship. And so to be able to really dive deep into the type of person you want to be able to be a worship leader was really important for me. And I'm very glad that it went that way.
Good. Maddy, thanks for joining. Maddy's been running the sound and slides all day, so I wanted to. Oh yeah, I'm glad you did. Yeah, no worries. Tell me about you. You also kind of knew right up front who you wanted to ask for a mentor, correct? Yeah. How did you choose this person?
So I knew this person. Her name was Pam Greer. We were in a Bible study together, me, her, and a few other people. She's also a good family friend, and a mentor is somebody I want to be able to trust, to be able to share my personal information with, and know that they will be able to talk to me, help me grow, keep personal what is personal. I feel like knowing that she is a friend and knowing that we all know her at home means that I can just trust her and be able to talk to her and ask her questions, and she can teach me and help me grow in my relationship with Christ.
Awesome. When you this is to all of you, but Andy, I want you to go last. Um, when you asked the people you did to be a mentor, What was the response like?
Well, when I asked Pam to mentor me, she was very excited. She also shared that she felt God had been previously calling her to mentor someone. She just didn't know when that would happen, who that would be, and eventually it was me.
Me, I like that.
My worship leader, when I first brought it up to her, was very excited and very interested about this opportunity. And during our first meeting, she shared that she had never had the opportunity to mentor someone. And she said it's a really great growing experience for her as well. And so she was kind of learning like how to figure out how to mentor someone individually instead of just everyone. And so I think that she was very grateful that I asked. And I know that she learned a lot from the experience as well.
So there's only so much you can interpret from an email. So I can't exactly say what he was thinking. Um, because a random stranger, teenage guy, reached out to your inbox saying, "Hey, want to hang out?" Some people might take that a little odd. But he was, I don't want to use the word skeptical. He emphasized that he wanted it to happen organically. He believed that mentorships should. And this, of course, a cold email is not the most organic way of starting something like this. But he was open to just grabbing coffee on an afternoon. And I think that's all he said. It was a really short email.
When I told him about the mentorship that I wanted him to mentor me, he was very excited, but he was also kind of surprised that I asked him, just because we really hadn't had much contact in like the years after I moved out of children's ministry. And so it was kind of a full circle moment for him, teaching me when I was a child, and then now he's mentoring me as an adult. And so it was just a kind of a full circle moment, and that he was just really excited to mentor me.
Did you guys think they would be as excited as they were before you started this?
I would say I did expect her to be excited, but maybe not as much as she was.
Andy, you had people, because we talked a good while about this, right? You had many people that were speaking into your life, had spoken to your life, and you realized that mentorship had been going on in some capacity. Um, hearing the, and this is not to put blame or criticize how you went about it, but hearing these stories, what do you think about the possibility of asking someone in the future? Um, and was there anything about the process that kind of bothered you?
I definitely need to be more direct. Absolutely. I need to push further for more response from the people I'm trying to talk to. Uh, how it had gone about was the two or three people that I talked to about mentoring me. I asked them, I said, "Have you ever been mentored by anybody?" And all three of them said, "No, no, not by one person, but I had a bunch of different people that grew me into who I am." And then they told me about that, and the conversation went on from there. But I never got back around to, can you mentor me? Can you spend time with me? Talk with me. So going into the summer, I'm going to be much more direct with that.
So open to all of you here. So having, and some of you I think have been mentored before this, and specifically when I don't want to confuse this too much, but mentorship, I'm not equating with discipleship. Someone could be mentored and not be discipled, okay? But this was to have a discipleship component. So, having been in this kind of relationship now, what does that do for you in terms of thinking about how you may mentor, disciple someone in the future?
So, going into this, I really didn't know what to expect on the end of getting discipled, but now that I've seen how she does it, Like, I would never have thought I would have been able to disciple someone or mentor someone in any way. But going into it, I really see that it's just, I went in and I had questions and she answered them, and most of her answers I would have been able to answer. And I like didn't realize that. And I just think it's has changed my perspective so much on what I think I'm capable of.
So I didn't know what to expect either. I never really been mentored. I've had people who've made impact in my life, but not really somebody who I would just sit down one on one with and be discipled by. And so it was just a very unique and it was a fun experience. And that being this mentor to somebody, I know that I can do. That I've learned from what he's been telling me, and like it's just really listening to what the other person has to say and then talking about what your experiences have been and answering what questions they have.
It was a topic during some of our discussions between me and Tyler that almost we were kind of talking about mentorship. Now that I think about it, I don't think I realized that in the moment, but I have a tendency, and I want to phrase this very carefully. God often uses me to burn things down, which is just an interesting thing to say. And I think I can confidently say that, yes, that is typically where God prompts me. Not that I always do it by the Spirit's prompting, and sometimes it's just because Carson wants to do it. But taking that into mentorship, you're going to burn the relationship if you enter that relationship being like, I'm going to burn down that belief in them. And perhaps that's occasionally what God wants us to do. But I think the point I'd like to communicate here is something we talked about is you have to get to the point in a relationship between a mentor and a mentee where they invite that to happen. You can't force that. And that was something I think I needed to learn, that I can't like railroad my way over them to fix it. I have to like go through that like emotional and relational connection first before we get to that point.
Oh, one thing I thought about being mentored, I didn't realize how much it took not just to talk, but to listen to how the person's actually feeling, what they're going through. Sometimes I'm not always good at that, and I realize that I need to grow in that and just stop and listen, stop and think before I jump to conclusions or go into actions.
All right, open up the floor. What do you guys think about this? Tell me the questions, or ask them questions of this experience. Trip them up if you can, please. It's a lot more fun if we do that. So, what do you think?
I'm a child of the Jesus age, 60s and 70s. We were all discipled, and we also all discipled someone else. That was even a little phrase that used to go around as, do you disciple and have you been discipled? So I really, as you spoke, it seemed like they were being discipled. What I want to know is what aspect of your conversations weren't just spiritual discipling, but were a mentor. Yours is, I forgot your name, but you obviously were being mentored to make sure that you understood the spiritual needs so that you could do worship leadership, and that's a discipling. Also, if she had seen any, you've got to take care of this before if she had seen any flaws in you, that's mentoring. So did the rest of you, even though you weren't being discipled or mentored by someone in your field that you're interested in, was there some grooming, or was it really discipling, like old-fashioned Bible discipling?
So our first half of our meeting, we actually talked a lot about not discipleship, and we talked a lot about life. One of the things we talked about was financial issues. So I'm from Wabash. It's about an hour and 45 minutes away. So I had to find apartment here close to Vertical. And so just a lot of, and then other finances just have been really struggle, but we were talking about this and he's also struggling with financial issues. And so we were just kind of learning, we were learning together on how to balance that and then to also just trust God in the process. And that was probably one of our main topics that we talked about.
Yeah.
What was the hardest part of being mentored?
I think for me it was sending an email to a stranger. That was, although I am pretty outgoing, that was a little bit of a stretch for me, kind of practicing rejection therapy right there. Because if that would have been a no, I'm like, oh, that would hurt. Making yourself emotionally vulnerable over email. um, I think that was the hardest part, and honestly, from there it was really easy for me.
I think the hardest part for me was realizing where my blind spots were and the parts that I wasn't focused on because although my questions weren't always focused on my blind spots because I didn't really realize what they were at the time, some of her answers would like prompt that in my mind to be like, "Oh, I'm not doing that. I really should be." And it's something that has like come up in me and now I can like think about it and process it and I'm very much more intentional about doing it.
Even though I didn't have one specific mentor, I think that led into me having to focus on every interaction I had even deeper. I think that was the most challenging aspect of it was while I was struggling to find a mentor, I was also trying to make sure that every interaction I had, I was getting something out of it. And so there's a lot more um, purpose behind most of the conversations I've had, just with friends and with family and with mentors, I guess, in general.
One thing that was hard for me about going through mentorship was just finding enough time because I and Pam are both very busy people. I have school and work and extracurricular activities. Her and her husband own property to rent out for Airbnbs. And what just made it hard is just like we're so busy, it's hard to just sit down and find time and not think about other things while we're meeting.
So what you're saying is mentorship, discipleship has to be intentional.
Yeah.
No, you missed it. You missed it. That was a Susan, I told them in our classes, anytime a value is mentioned, they do the wave. And if they all did the wave in front of you, I'd buy them ice cream. I was a soft one. I lobbed it up there and they didn't even hit it. So you said, yeah, that's a ripple. That's not a wave. Okay. Okay, what else? Any more questions for these guys?
Alea mentioned that you went through a book. What book did you go through? Did anybody else have a book, or was it just talking? I succeeded. I stumped her.
Have some cake.
So it was a discipleship book. It was the path to obedience through discipleship. I think it was a little bit like that. but, um, but it was really about having joy. It was joy, happiness, service, obedience. Obedience was probably the part that really was the part that took away the most out of the book was being obedient to God and on what he wants me to do. Because if before vertical doing all this, I wouldn't be here if I wasn't obedient to God. And so just that part really just stuck out to me was being obedient and that following God is the only way path forward.
The rest of you do a book? No books. No books. Okay. All right. Any more questions? Okay, guys, thank you so much. Appreciate you doing that. All right. And next, we'll bring up Mr. Sawyer. All right, so I singled Sawyer out because you you kind of perturbed at this when you first started, right? You didn't want to do this assignment.
No, not at all.
Why not?
So I'm around church a lot. I'm always at my church. I've been mentored by I'm like blessed by God to have like 13 different mentors I could go to. So I'm super blessed in that way, but it just felt like an extra chore of something I would have to add on to my schedule. And in the midst of it, even well, I'll talk about that later. Yeah, it was a chore to add on to the schedule, and I'd already been around it a lot, so I'm like, I don't need to do this again. Like I've done this so much. So yeah, that's what I would say.
Okay, and that all changed, and it changed. Give me the story about that when it changed.
Yeah, so kind of the Lord worked it out in the sense of I would be going to people to mentor, or no, to get mentored by. I'd be like, okay, I can go to my youth pastor and he can mentor me. And then I would message him, and our schedules just wouldn't work out whatsoever, like with his schedule and my schedule. And I'd go to somebody else, like this guy can, and then our schedules wouldn't work out. So it kind of just like didn't work out for like 3 weeks. And then in the midst, so my uncle is the principal of our church's school. He lives 2 houses down from us, and he has a hot tub. So I'll run over to his house and get in his hot tub all the time. But I ran over and I got in the hot tub with my little cousin Keaton, and then I was like, I had a really really good conversation with him, not even intending it to be like a mentorship thing. And I get back and I'm like convicted, and I'm thinking, why am I not using Tom's assignment to do something that would actually matter? So through that, I decided I was just gonna mentor Keaton, and we had a lot of really good conversations in the midst of it. So the Lord used it in that way. It was definitely spirit guided.
Okay, so and had you mentored someone before, discipled someone?
Not in like sit down meetings, but in the sense of living life with people, I've done that for a while, but not in sit down, like we're going to talk about this meetings and things like that. So no, not one on one in that way.
Okay, so it sounds like what you're saying that the conversations here were um, spiritually intentional, and you took advantage of the time to hit the deeper stuff.
Yeah.
Is that fair?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, good. So, did you then propose something to Keaton and say, hey, you're now officially my mentee? Did you just start meeting with him and he didn't know what was going on? How did you advance this thing?
Well, at first I was like, let's just get in the hot tub. And we would get in the hot tub and we'd talk probably like for 45 minutes about basketball and then like 30 minutes mentorship meetings. And then I was like, all right, this has got to get more like intentional and real. So I was like, hey, Keaton, let's go to Wingstop. So we went to Wingstop and just things like that. I mean, I didn't really tell him. I told him I had a mentorship assignment and let's just hang out and we can like count it as my mentorship meetings. And then it bloomed into something really special. So that's what I would say. I didn't tell him like we're gonna go have a mentorship meeting because that's like super daunting. It was more like let's just go hang out and talk about things, and it got really deep and really real. And I would not credit myself with that because I wasn't like, all right, let's get real right now. It was just kind of like we would meet and then we would just it got brought up through just like natural progression of things, and that was definitely the Lord. And he had things on his heart that he wanted to talk about. I didn't really bring up a topic or I didn't really have questions prepared. So it wasn't really me doing anything. I just showed up and he had stuff he wanted to talk about and we talked about it. And it was just something so sweet and completely dominated by the spirit, not myself.
So, when at some point you became aware of the opportunity, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what was that? What was that like? Do you think you would be aware of the opportunity if it wasn't an assignment? Is yeah. Let's just go there.
That's a good question. Um, I would say he had a lot to say the first time we got in the hot tub. So we talked, like I hadn't gotten in a while because it's like summertime. So why you get in the hot tub in the summer? Uh, but we had a really good conversation and he is just like, so he's like just now a freshman in high school. So he's young and I just saw maturity in him that I hadn't really seen before. We just had a really, really long and good conversation about things that were actually like really hard and things that I had experienced. Specifically, I wrote a lot about in my essay, just like living as a light. He's been around, so he was in the missions field in the Caribbean for a while, but that was when he was younger. And now he's here, and he goes to a Christian church. He plays in Christian basketball games, and he goes to a Christian school. So like he'd never been around secular like places and things. And just recently, he's gotten good enough at basketball. He's tall enough now where he's now playing in like a secular team, like a pretty good team. And he just talked about like how he wants to live as a light. So I think through specifically the Spirit, I think it was a combination of things. I think that the assignment did help in the sense of I became aware of the opportunity because of the assignment. But I also think it was a change in his heart that I saw, that the Lord helped me see, that wasn't originally there. And just the topics he had brought up, I'm like, shoot, I have experience in this and I can speak into him in this way. So I think it was a combination of the two, just me seeing the change in his heart and him actually wanting to grow and change. And also just the assignment is making me aware that like I do need to do these things and be convicted to do these things in his life.
So do you, having lived through this once now, do you have, and I can't remember if it was you I was talking with about this, but it's like you see things now that you didn't see before in terms of people who might need to be discipled.
Yeah, I'm going to talk about in my presentation a little bit just the idea that I need to be intentional and aware of like who can I speak into, and I think the assignment definitely like helped with that for sure. But also just how the Spirit's been speaking to me recently about specifically ministry and just mentorship. And I found out like I had a passion for it. I've never really, like I said before, I've never really had the one-on-ones, but I love it. I just have like I talked about in the essay, I have like more of an extreme love for Keaton than I did before because I don't know, I just see his problems. I see what he's going through and like I see his heart in it. And I'm like in love with that. And just like only a love that Christ can give you. It's not my love for him. It's like a love that Christ has put on me. And he's constantly in my prayers now. And he's like, I don't know. It's just like a different thing that you don't really experience until you do something like this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's okay. I'm not going to add to that. What questions do you have for Sawyer? Todd?
Yeah.
Important component of mentoring is intentionality and structure. And a problem with the mentoring process is intentionality and structure. What I mean by that is you got to be intentional when you go into it. You got to know why you're here, the conversation you're going to have, because you're going to have a purpose and a goal for it. It can also create, formality and awkwardness, and it can do that. And you might have just discovered a whole new model, mentoring about hot tubs. And I mean, you took that through it a lot. Now you've done it. You've done the very formal, structured process, and you kind of stumbled into this very natural, organic. Work on how you see the differences there, having seen both sides of the mentoring relationship.
Yeah. That's a great question. And me and my friend actually, I've been talking about it with some of my other classmates. We argue about there's a line somewhere of like what do you need to be called to and like what do you need to like have a structure in the sense of like the Spirit versus structure. And just find out a lot about that just through this last semester and what is necessary to be led by the Spirit in and what do you need to like I need to do this on my own accord and build a structure in this. But I think this time I am more inclined to not have a structure. So to have a structure is something maybe I should start doing because I don't know, it's just one of my blind spots for sure. But I really do believe that the Spirit is present today and that to be dominated by the Spirit is necessary in mentoring. And so I think that that aspect of it is very important, but it can also be important to come in with questions to ask and things that you want to talk about specifically so that if the Spirit leads you elsewhere, you can just drop all of that and move on, But I think there is a really important balance in it, but you just have to trust in the Spirit that He will speak in those times. So I would say, I don't know if that answers your question or not. But.
So you didn't enter into the conversation, or you didn't think, oh, good, it's Keaton, I'm going to mentor, and so now we're going to get together and get in the hot tub, and you didn't have a 5-point plan of a conversation, right?
Yeah, no, I didn't. I think that also has some. Fox asked the question to the other people. He was like, "What was the most difficult part about it?" And I was like thinking about how to answer that for myself. Like, what was the most difficult part? And I would say the most difficult part was probably just to shut up, like for myself, because like I do so much talking, and I'm always like I'm just more inclined to be like, "Oh, I can tell about this, or I can tell about this, I can tell about this." But then like I don't know. Even through Tom and his classes, he's just like sometimes you just let them talk and figure it out themselves, and you like poke and help them get in there, you know. But yeah, so I would say I definitely tried to with Keaton let him do a lot of talking because he has a lot on his heart that he wants to say, and it is really good. So, and I didn't say sometimes I didn't say a lot. I just let him talk and would ask like further questions for him to get deeper, kind of like Tom does. So, so I would say.
Good. What other questions do you have? Yes, ma'am.
Uncle Brandon, my brother, has been this for you as well in the hot tub.
Yes.
So I just want you to share like how that's been in your life.
Well, yeah, I mean, a lot of the times I'll come to Brandon with a bunch of questions and I'll be like, well, what about this? What about this? What about this? And then we'll just spend like a long time in the hot tub talking about it. And I think he's a lot like me, which is sometimes a problem because we both want to do a lot of talking. But I think we've talked about that in the sense of mentoring and our like strong personalities, like very opinionated people, what it looks like to let the other person talk. So I think he's had a huge influence on how I think about things and how I answer questions specifically how I answer questions. He has had a very big impact on that. So that's what I would say. Thanks, Mom.
Anyone else? So one last thing here, we can wrap this up. Not having an agenda structures both your help and your enemy and that kind of thing. When you speak, then it seems like you would have to speak out of all that you are and have become to this point, right?
Yeah.
And so if that's true, then what things are you wanting to add to your life to improve your ability to mentor and disciple others?
Well, obviously, the more you do it, the better you're going to get at it, I think. I think that's true in a way. I think also something, I don't know if this is not going to answer your question. Sorry, Tom. I'm going to go a different direction. Just something sweet that the Lord has done. Specifically in this last semester is I think he's called me towards more of the high school ministry inside of things, and along with that, just being able to speak into people's lives, what I felt and what I did and how I was called to the Lord through high school, I think reflects a lot of other people and how they feel. So I think the stories I have through, because I went to public school, which is different than a lot of people at my church that I'm discipling. A lot of them go to school there. So I think that the stories I have there really speak into their questions that they have. So that's what I would say. I would say just gaining experience in the sense of just like walking out Christian life is experience enough, you know? It's hard as it is, and we all have our challenges every day, but just walking through it with the Lord and reading the scripture every day is obviously a Sunday school answer I can give you. But, I mean, that's what I would say.
Good enough. Thanks, Sawyer. Appreciate it.